A picture says 1,000 words, a story says 1,000 pictures. Welcome to the Art of the Photographer. I'm Farland Chang. Thank you for joining me on this program as we embark on a journey with Michael Yamashita, the world-acclaimed National Geographic photojournalist, the cameraman's cameraman. Mike has been shooting for the National Geographic Magazine for more than 30 years. He's combined his dual passions for photography and travel. And while his focus has been on Asia, his work has taken him to 6 continents. In this program, we'll travel with Mike through his mind's eye, and we hope you'll walk away with a fresh, insightful new perspective about the world around you. No matter whether you're a professional or amateur photographer, who you are, where you've traveled, or where you're from.
The journey is the destination. Just when you think you've come to the end of your travels, there's another place, another face to shoot, someplace, somewhere else.
I had the privilege of meeting Mike in Hong Kong after working as an anchor for CNN International and correspondent for NBC News. As a fellow storyteller and one dedicated to bridging East and West, I'm honored to help my colleagues share our stories. When Mike is not traveling, he's with his family in rural New Jersey, where he maintains his studio. And that's where I caught up with him. His story now and the art of the photographer.
Well, for me, the joy of being a photographer is actually the lifestyle. Now, I love travel, and having no formal training, I guess I'm still an amateur, though I get paid for this. I never studied photography, so I feel very much like any amateur photographer feels about taking pictures. It was a great hobby, and the joy is in the travel and seeing different things, experiencing people's different lives, and it's the experience itself that's enjoyable, as well as then putting it on film, which obviously I'm making a picture of it, which obviously I'm pretty good at. But I just want to say that photography is not about equipment. I use the finest cameras, and they are important for capturing the highest quality picture I can. But what photography is really about is the vision. And that means whether it's an instant where I am sizing up a scene and immediately have a picture come into my mind, or something that I've planned weeks, months ahead that I want to photograph. The point is that the picture starts here. I have it in my mind. I am seeing something that in my mind's eye that I want to capture in this way. And that makes it also a lot easier, because rather than randomly coming upon a scene and randomly capturing it and hoping that it's going to be good, if you have it here and you see it and recognize it and then can go click, it becomes a hunt, a quest to find this thing that when you see it, therefore you recognize it and click, you've got it. So I try and impart to my students when I teach workshops that that's what they should be doing, is thinking very much about the picture they're going to take and forming an image of that, having it in your mind's eye. So you have to go about it in a fairly organized way, and so that's about vision. And then once you find that subject, or once you're onto that subject, number 2, then you're going to work that subject. And you're going to work it from many different angles, and perhaps on 1 or 2 days, or morning and afternoon, or if it's an hour, or if it's 30 minutes, whatever it is, whatever time you're going to devote to it, you're going to explore that subject from different angles, perhaps different light, different lenses. You're going to explore every possibility to get that subject in the most unique and interesting way.
I feel privileged being a photographer and being able to see scenes like this. and record them because I feel like I'm seeing history and putting it on film, seeing something that won't be here in another 3 or 4 years.
You can't overemphasize light and the impact that's going to have on the photograph. You are out shooting in the best light. That means you got to get up early. You got to be up for the sunrise because that's the good light, the color, the directional aspect, the warmth of that. And so you need to take advantage of every good lighting situation. Not that you're going to give up shooting any other time of the day, but for sure you're going to be out there giving yourself the big advantage of great light by choosing those landscapes early in the morning and late afternoon.
My favorite time of the day, sunrise. The colors are warm, the light is soft, and everybody's waking up and doing what they do in the morning. We like to call it magic hour because good things happen with the light.
The magic hour is half an hour before sunrise, half an hour after sunrise, half an hour before sunset, half an hour after sunset. Composition. Keep the picture simple. Don't get too complicated. Let's see one dominant subject. Layer the composition. Maybe you're going to have something big in the foreground with something repetitive in the middle ground and the background. But whatever it is, limit the number of elements in the picture. Keep it simple. Simple has impact. Clutter doesn't do anybody any good. Also with composition, especially with landscapes, don't split the picture in the middle. Think in terms of thirds, either horizontally or vertically. If you cut your rectangle into thirds, it's where those intersecting lines are. That is where your subject is placed. Of course, these rules are all made to be broken, but as a general rule, think in terms of thirds. I'm often asked what makes a great picture, and for me, it's all about impact. I want a picture to jump off the page. I want the page flipper to stop because the subject or the photograph is so arresting that he has to stop and look at it and then perhaps read the caption. And then in the case of the Geographic, the idea is then they might read the story. But the point is that that photograph stops the reader from page flipping because it has impact. And it's that impact that forces one to address what's in there. And if I can stop you from page flipping, then I'm certainly doing my job. And of course, that is accomplished through the subject, the color, the composition, the light, and the gesture, just exactly the way I explained what good photography is about. Another tip, well, do your homework, be prepared. The old Boy Scout motto, but you have to be prepared. Your equipment, your knowledge of the subject, where you're going, what the direction of the light is, where's north, where's south, east, west. It all goes into making good pictures. Planning, research. How did I do the research for Marco Polo? By reading everything I could on the subject. I knew where to go. I knew what the subjects were, and then it was a question of hunting to find them.
What hasn't changed are the people and the faces and the bargaining and all this human interaction, and that's what turns me on. And those are the pictures that I'm going for.
I'm a storyteller, and I think of pictures in terms of stories and how best to tell that story. So when I'm approaching a subject, I'm thinking how I can show whatever it is in the simplest, most graphic, interesting way that that picture will read easily, so that a person can look at it and without a caption know what's going on, know what the story is. Be flexible. Take advantage of odd weather, odd lighting, odd moments. Seek it out. I mean, a lot of photography is just being ready to experience something and put it on the film. And if therefore be ready and receptive to receive that visual stimuli and capture it on film. Be ready to click the shutter. Shutter chance is what the Japanese call that. Be ready for the moment. Attention to detail. You're responsible for everything in that frame, from each edge and every corner. What's in it or what's not in it is up to you, and you have to be aware of that all times. And if it's some element that doesn't belong there, it's going to be distracting. So you have to be very detail oriented, and that includes studying the edge of your frame. And when you are watching or observing your subject while you're shooting, you're looking for those movements. Whatever it is, it's going to shed some understanding of the subject, whether it be an action or motion in some way, or a landscape. Whatever the subject is, study the details. Go over that and look this way and that way before you bring the camera up to your eye. They study photography, I mean, go look at a lot of pictures, buy photography books, which is also be a good thing, and seek out and look at what people consider to be good in order to have some point of reference on which to judge your own stuff. Today, the odds of becoming a successful photographer are so small, of actually becoming successful, because there's too many photographers out there. There's too much content. So this is a problem, obviously. If I thought it was competitive in my day, it's even more so now. So you really have to be good. You have to have something to say. You're going to be a storyteller. You have to master it all. And how are you going to do that? You've got to eat, sleep, drink photography. You have to be obsessed by photography, or you're not going to make it. You've really got to focus on your craft. If you love photography, that's not going to be a problem. And that's where I was 30 years ago, and that's the way I started. Being totally obsessed and in love with the medium of photography.
Mike's specialty is bringing to life the epic odysseys of the world's greatest explorers. These include Italy's legendary Marco Polo and China's greatest admiral, Zheng He. With Marco Polo, Mike explores whether the Venetian merchant truly journeyed from Venice to China. And was he indeed the world's greatest overland explorer, or the world's biggest liar?
When I first got the idea to do the Marco Polo route, I wanted to do it for the sheer adventure of it.
started with an open mind. I decided I was going to use his book like my guidebook and travel the route and make up my own mind as to whether he made it or not. The feel of this place is definitely, for me, 13th century. It's as like nothing has changed here in the 700 years. I come here, I feel like I'm seeing exactly what Marco saw. So whether you become a believer or not, what you're about to see is one of the greatest overland journeys ever made.
With Zheng He, admiral of the world's largest armada of ships, Mike explores how the most powerful naval commander at the time, with his unrivaled fleet, could suddenly vanish because of a colossal mistake.
Years ago, China emerges from an age of darkness. With the biggest fleet ever assembled, it will forge a new path across unknown oceans, led by a towering admiral 100 years before Columbus. Catastrophic mistake. Adventure awaits as National Geographic photographer Mike Yamashita sets out across the South China Sea and Indian Ocean to find out why. Discover an ancient world and reveal this mysterious admiral's extraordinary legacy. A changing point in history. A forgotten hero. His story to the world.
In these and other stories, let's go back into the photographer's mind's eye and learn about Mike's favorite photos.
You know, the biggest difficulty in doing this story on Zheng He, the great 15th century admiral, that the world's greatest explorer that nobody knows about. Not even the Chinese really spent a lot of time explaining or writing about this man. He was a non-Chinese, he was a Muslim, he was a probably from Eastern of Central European origin. and a eunuch to boot. So even in his hometown, the cover of this book shows this dilapidated painting of Zheng He. We thought this was a good place to start, considering if this is his hometown where this mural has been painted and they've let it go in that much disrepair. Well, what can you say? A forgotten Chinese hero. But the difficulty in doing this story was the fact that all these boats that he sailed on don't exist. And there are very few sailboats now in general, anywhere in the South China Sea, let alone the Indian Ocean or off the coast of Africa. But this was one of them, and so I choose this picture, kind of a land ho picture. I have this guy probably from Oman. I think this boat was built in Oman. This is an Arab dhow, and he's looking across at Lamu off the coast of Kenya, and it feels, for me, gives me the feeling of what it was like sailing on a boat in Zheng He's time. So I'll pull this as my first picture that I think is worth looking at. Okay, so I did quite a bit around China, of course, where he came from. And these fish traps around Xiamen were a favorite subject. It had beautiful light, the graphic compositions and the possibilities with all these lines and repeating patterns made this a very fun place to shoot. I spent a couple of days here. Nets, same thing. I wasn't looking for anything but a beautiful picture with a wonderful pattern. And the light was beautiful early morning. And it was also an important subject because as Marco Polo, who actually preceded Zheng He by several hundred years, described these same nets and Chinese aquaculture well before the West had this kind of technology. Let's see, what else can I take you? Here's another picture that I like very much for the light, and I'm on the island of Meizhou. And it's early morning again, and I have this very simple scene of fishermen carrying their catch from their boats to the market on land. And again, it's all about the light. Of course, the bonus of shooting Zheng He was the fact that I got to spend all this time on the water, because water is one of my favorite subjects. There's nothing like seeing the reflection and the colors that dance on top of water. This is an interesting photograph for a number of reasons. I love this picture. It's unusual because it's in the snow. This is the Forbidden City. I've been here many times. It was the first time I actually saw it under snow. And thanks to jet lag, I had arrived the day before, and thanks to jet lag, I was up early, like 4 o'clock. I looked out my window, it was snowing, jumped into a taxi, went to Coal Hill, which is, they call it Coal Hill, it's the highest point of Beijing, actually. And I ran through the snow, literally, to the top of this hill to get this picture. And from the top, I'm looking over the Forbidden City. The red of these city gates pops out of this picture. And also, I'm helped by the fact that this is snow. This is what normally would be white sky. It'd be blown out because the contrast between what's here and what's here generally is too great, so that usually when you're going to point at a subject with this much sky, it's going to be white, and this is going to be well exposed. Well, the point is, the fact of the matter is that there is snow here, which is white. And therefore, in exposing for white snow, this is darken the sky. And I have this very nice detail framed in the pavilion up on top of the hill. So I have this rich textured sky with snow here on the bottom, and I couldn't have gotten it in anything but this kind of snow condition. So he gets blown to Vietnam, and so I get several weeks to cruise the coastline, and of course I love Vietnam very much. It's where my daughter is from, and I get to see scenes like this. This is the Mekong Delta. It's the biggest floating market in the world. I'm shooting from a bridge, and I get all these boats. What can I say? I'm back in the days of Jung Ho, looking at a scene with nothing of, again, of this century. Another favorite picture of Vietnam that I shot from a military helicopter. This is the same scene down below when I was of this marketplace. I came here, I saw the possibilities, all these canals radiating out from the center of the city, and I thought, wow, what it would look like if it was up high and could see that, because the nature of this part of Vietnam is just like one big sponge. There are no roads. Well, there are roads, but there are mostly canals, and I got up there in the helicopter and I saw this scene. This really tells the story of the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. Okay, I'm here in a marigold farm. It's a very graphic picture. I actually got up on, I can't remember, I think I got a ladder and got up high over this marigold farm to show this very clever way that Vietnamese water their plants, and they build these racks right over the water. The flowers are in pots, and they can dip down, take the water, and put it right on top of the plants, and of course whatever is extra goes right back into the river running underneath it. And it says something about the Vietnamese, because they love flowers. Everywhere you go in Vietnam, you always find flowers. Here's an example of camera at the ready. When I'm traveling, my eyes are always scanning, looking for the next picture. My cameras are at my side. Either I'm carrying them or one is in my hands. I'm searching for something to catch my eye, and suddenly out of the corner of my eye I see this guy coming down, standing on his water buffalo. I call this water buffalo surfing, and I was there to grab this picture, which is pretty funny. You can't help but laugh when you see it. Monkey bridges. Now, as you can see, it takes the dexterity of a monkey in order to traverse one of these bridges, and I waited a long time to get this picture because I needed people on the bridge as well as under the bridge to make it come to life. So I waited till I had these boats coming towards me and kids coming home from school crossing the bridge. I shot it backlit, and the thought comes to me, what must it have been like to be an American soldier there and having to climb over one of those things in full gear? Must have been really tough, horrible place to be fighting, considering that on both sides of this creek there's plenty of places to hide. So now here's a favorite picture of mine. I'm at the Saifuddin Mosque, the main mosque, one of the most expensive ever built in the world. Of course, Brunei is the world's richest country because of its oil wealth. And I was here photographing a morning service. I forgot what day it was. Maybe it was Friday, maybe it was Sunday. It doesn't matter. The point is that this kid with his dad is learning how to pray. And I thought of my own kid, or I thought of Jung-He, how he must have learned from his father the same way on how to properly pray to Muhammad. And this is the ultimate praying picture for me. Layer upon layer of people focused in on the kid and his father, slightly looking up to observe how it's being done. And here's a picture of that same mosque, this time a landscape. There were fires burning in the area, and it filled the air with a very heavy smoke. And as the sun came up, it turned that sky to this pink glow. And that dome of this mosque is made of gold leaf, which is why it's one of the most expensive buildings ever built. And the glow off of that mixed into this pink sky with the blue water, it's just a wonderful collection of colors. And then we go to Indonesia. I like this picture for its energy. These kids are having a great time. They're on the beach, and of course, so am I. By backlighting, I've turned this this heavy surf into this powerful flow of water. And by backlighting, the splashing of the kids is highlighted, so you can see this wonderful backlit foam as these kids are running through the surf. There's so much energy there. Well, then we go to Malaysia, and I went to Malacca, which was the first overseas Chinese settlement, settled by Jung-He sailors, as they needed a depot to deposit all the trading goods that they were either carrying out to the Indian Ocean or bringing back from. Unfortunately, Malacca is now a big tourist mecca, and unfortunately, most of what's interesting as far as anything old has been lost or too well preserved in a museum. So, looking for a subject there, I decided to focus on the community of indigenous Chinese, many of whom could be descended from Jung-He sailors. And therefore, I was looking for, in the community, for something interesting to photograph, and I came upon this festival, an Indian festival, where the most extreme worshippers just happen to be Chinese. I thought, isn't this a great statement? It shows how these Chinese have become such a part of the local population that they even partake in a non-traditional Indian festival where they are skewering themselves and doing other bodily harm to thank the gods for whatever favors they ask for being fulfilled. So obviously it's great drama to see these guys getting skewered. Of course, they're telling us that it doesn't hurt, but my eye and my camera are telling me that that looks mighty painful. As does that. This guy was in some sort of a trance. He definitely was not feeling pain. As I'm very close to him and he's coming towards me, and I just dropped down just where he was and I shot up and got this picture of this guy thinking that he's some sort of a lion or a cat of some sort and crawling along the pavement. So this was my ultimate picture. I chose this angle because I wanted to have something really graphic up front. And I went for it just for that reason. I shot a lot of this situation because it gave me this layering where I could see this process 2 or 3 times. Okay. Well, the legacy of Zheng He, well, first of all, Zheng He was a very modern man. He lived at the same time as, say, as the Spanish Inquisition. There were a lot of people around the world being killed because they worshiped a different god. They were a minority. And here we have a guy who is a minority, is a Muslim living in China, and a eunuch, because in spite of all this, or maybe because of it, he has this empathy for the common person, the poor, the minority peoples, the people who are of different race and religion, and goes around the world doing tribute trade, meaning bringing all the best from China and trading for lesser items around the world. But he's basically out there to on a kind of a diplomatic mission to show the world the greatness of China. And he brings with it a vision of equality. He doesn't conquer. He does not colonize. He goes on a trading mission to show the world the good of China. And for this reason, China should be really elevating this guy as a great hero, because if everybody's foreign policy was built on a person with this kind of modern outlook, where people should live in peace and be treated equally, then we might be on the way to living in a better place. This became the cover of the magazine. Is it the cover of this book? No. And for many reasons. But let me tell you about the taking of this picture, because it's this typical situation that we get in. So I started really becoming a believer in Marco Polo in Iran. And this was another one of those encounters that made it more and more, for me, unlikely that he could have made up all this information. He actually talks about these black-skinned people that live on the Persian Gulf in a place called Bandar Abbas. Well, we knew they were there, and we knew that they had these red masks, a very interesting form of hijab, the covering that Muslim women must wear, or all women must wear in Iran by law. And this is the most unique anywhere in the country, and obviously makes a great picture. So I was there knowing, A, it was a great subject, Marco Polo talked about it, and B and C, it was just really photogenic. So I'm shooting for an afternoon, and I had women in the village. Every time I'd run into somebody, I'd ask them, "Can I photograph you?" I had them up against the adobe colored mud huts. I had them in windows. I had them in doorways. I shot every variation of every portrait situation you could think of, trying to make a great picture and hopefully cover. So I was walking back to the car, fairly satisfied that I had something good. I see this woman sitting down by the stream, washing some dishes. Maybe it was clothes, I can't remember. But she turns up to me like this, and I just, my reflex just picked up the camera, boom, 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 shot 6 frames. All those rolls that I'd shot the afternoon of posed portraits, none of them came close to this frame. We threw all those pictures out, and this one gesture in the good light, looking directly at me with those white eyes and the black skin, just was magical, just made it, and this is what ended up on the cover of our story. And also the lead picture or the poster for my exhibition that I had in Italy. Most photographs are a combination of vision and work, hard work, working on the subject. And I told you how we have something in our brain and we go out and we try and make a great picture from this image that I have that's in my mind's eye. In the case of the woman with the red mask, well, the whole village, of course, has got women with red masks, and I worked really hard to make that one frame. But again, the wonderful thing about photography is this other thing, this other unknown quantity called serendipity. And how am I to know that in walking back to the Land Rover, I'm going to run into this scene totally by accident, nothing planned. I look down, she looks up at me, we connect, gling, gling, gling. I get a frame that is better than anything that I had gotten from arranging portraits. So that's all it, sometimes that's all it takes. As Bob Gilka, the famous director of photography at Geographic, who first brought me in, would say, all it takes is one. And here's my favorite picture of this situation. It's snowing. They're all hunkered down in the snow as it's snowing, and the snow being white is kicking up all this good light into their faces. So everybody's sort of individually lit, and you can see all the detail of those faces thanks to the weather conditions. And also the wonderful thing about seeing a print is that you can study it. Unlike a TV video where everything's moving around, you can sit here and look at all those faces. Here's a guy eating something, somebody else with prayer beads, some guy giving me the evil eye. But you can stay with this picture for a long time just looking at different faces. So here we are in Basra, famous for its Muslim architecture, and as you can, or Arabesque, I don't know exactly what you call this, but as you can see, it's wonderful, wonderfully detailed, but it's also in tremendous decay, which is way too bad. This is obviously has been neglected for quite a long time. And again, that old adage about not shooting in midday, this again is midday, but I've managed to use the shadow here to, in the case, to make this an interesting architecture picture by taking the two women wearing their burqa and photographing them in shadow, and get these two nice shapes here against this background of beautiful architecture. Again, using what I have available to me in terms of the light. Again, Marco always talking about religion. This is in Yazd, a mosque situation. And I have to also say that I'm not sure if these mosques actually have survived, because there was a huge earthquake a few years later after it was there, and I'm not sure if this particular one has survived. This is the Jame Mosque. Very lucky. I like to say photographers are paid to be lucky, and here I am on top of a roof. I have no idea where the sun's going to go down. I have a limited distance to walk and set up my picture because it's on a rooftop. And as I'm watching the sun, I realize it's going to set right on the top of that dome, and sure it has, and I've caught the sun just as it's hitting the horizon, just perfectly in the middle of the top of the dome. Photographers are paid to be lucky. They couldn't plan this one any better. So, if you look at this little detail here, you can see, or maybe it was here, I'm not sure, but you can see by this detail that I have taken this wide-angle view, and that same morning, not more than an hour or so later, I took this picture with a very long lens to emphasize the wall, and here's why. In this plain, there are a number of villages and towns which have lofty walls of mud, made as a defense against the banditti, who are very numerous and are called Karanoas. Remember this picture. It's important because he talks about a lofty wall of mud, maybe 100 foot high. Now here, I'm really beginning to believe in Marco Polo. All those pictures that I was able to find, all those situations that he described so accurately. And here we go again. So I'm in the middle of absolutely nowhere, in the middle of the desert, and we are in this tiny little town outside of Bam, and I'm asking somebody in this village, there was this guy, Marco Polo, who came here 700 years ago, and he talks about a hot spring that's somewhere in this vicinity. And in this village, they said, well, no, there's no hot spring here, so, okay, strike out. Go down the road another 20, 30 kilometers, and we ask the same question again, and this guy tells us, oh, yeah, well, if you go down this road here, so many kilometers, turn right, go out into, follow the road, you'll find a hot spring. There it is, exactly where Marco Polo said it would be. We find this incredible hot spring running through the desert, and the most amazing thing is it's bright green because of the mineral content. I think it was copper or something. It's made it this color. And again, photographer's luck. I happened to be there at the right time of day, as you can see by the shadow. Again, it's midday, but photographers know that if you're going to shoot water, like if you're going to the Caribbean to shoot that blue-green water, the best time to see the best color is midday. And same thing here. The sun is coming straight down, and I have this streak of green water running through this dry desert. And I wouldn't have had that color, same color, if I was here any other time of the day. But the main point is, Marco Polo, again, hits it just right. He's so accurate. He says there's going to be a hot spring here, and here it is. Let's see what he says. On the road by which we return from Hormuz to Kerman, you meet with some very fine plains, and you also find many natural hot baths. The baths that I have mentioned have excellent virtues. They cure the itch and several other diseases. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this picture, because in the end it has nothing to do with Marco Polo, but hey, my job is to make pictures, and I saw this beautiful net in the middle of the Persian Gulf. We're out there in a boat looking for Arab dhows, like the kind Marco Polo would have been looking for to sail to China. And just as he couldn't find anything seaworthy, in my case, I couldn't find anything made of anything but plastic, because today's Arab dhows, there are very few of them, and all of them seem to be made of fiberglass. So I couldn't find my subject. Instead, I found this. I took this picture of a weir net, and just happens to be one of my favorites. Photographer's luck again. I'm looking to illustrate this. The residents avoid living in the cities, for the heat in summer is so great that it would kill them. Hence they go out to sleep where there are streams and plenty of water. When they perceive that wind coming, they plunge into water up to the neck, and so abide until the wind has ceased. And I'm walking down the beach, and here's this kid hanging out in the water, completely wet. This is the picture we ended up publishing, and it is a fiberglass fishing boat in a very modern setting with a tractor bringing it in from the sea. So I photographed it at sunset so that it would be in silhouette, and this is how we told the story of Marco arriving at the Persian Gulf, not finding a boat, and therefore going overland. China. Marco's finally going to make it to China. We got out of Afghanistan by taking a UN plane. I had to leave all my gear on the ground, all my camping gear, and half of my luggage because we couldn't even fit it onto the airplane. It was too heavy. But sometimes that's the only way to go. In the case of Afghanistan, with borders being closed, you grab what ride you can. And we were hitchhikers. We had to beg to get on that plane. So then we got, after I took a couple of weeks, or a week holiday actually, in Istanbul to sort of recuperate, and then flew to Beijing. And from Beijing we flew to Kashgar, and from Kashgar we hopped in a land cruiser and drove to the Afghan border to continue our trip. And this is what it looks like from the other side. This is in Xinjiang, the westernmost province of China. It's in the Pamirs. It's Taxkorgan, and then the mountain is called Mustagata, the father of all mountains. Or was it the mother of all mountains? I don't remember. But this is what it looks like. As you can see, it's a glacier, and I got great light. And what a surprise to know that I was just on the other side. And if I only had an extra week and proper permissions, I could have come over the top of that into China. Yurts. Marco talks about living in yurts, and this is one where you got that good. For me, what makes it about this picture is the fire and that great smoke that's in the air and identified or intensified by the light coming through the hole in the top of the tent. Their houses are circular and are made of wands covered with felts. They are carried along with them wherever they go, for the wands are so strong bound together and likewise so well combined that the frame can be made very light. It's talking about the Mongols and their tents. As you can see, I'm in a schoolyard, and I'm shooting this picture of these cute kids, not paying any attention to the photographer. Of course, all wearing red, which is terrific. And people say, well, how come those... I'm asked the question, how come they're not making faces at you, doing what kids normally do, especially this age? Well, the reason is they can't see me. And as you can see by the shadow, the sun is directly behind me. So what are they looking at? They're looking at a big orange sphere and a silhouette. They can't see I'm a photographer. They can't see who I am. They just see a shadow. So I shot this picture with all the girls on one wall. All the girls wear red, and did I mention that all the boys wear blue? What a place. Photographer's dream. Odd weather, so it's snowing again in the middle of an area that rarely do you see snow, and in the middle of a month when you never see snow. So I'm looking for subject. We're sitting there in the middle. I'm looking for subject desperately because the weather is so beautiful. It's so unusual. And we're driving down the road, and suddenly I see all these people on the streets. The reason they're there? They're as surprised as I am. They want to see what's going on with all this snow. So all these factory workers have come out of the factory and are standing in the middle of the road, and thank God for that guy with the red umbrella that gives me the focal point. He enters the picture, slight bit of color and all this gray, black and white, and I have my picture. Here's a perfect situation for photographing people. These are Uyghurs. Marco's loves, of course, being a merchant, would understand these guys, and they are bargaining hard. And because they're bargaining hard over sheep, I think this was a sheep livestock market, they can't even see me, even though I'm only standing 2 feet from them. I have a wide-angle lens on them, banging away, shooting these pictures in front of them while they're doing their thing. And as you can see, these Uyghurs love to bargain very up close and personal. They've got a different sense of space. Now the big question is, who discovered or who invented pasta? Did Marco Polo bring spaghetti and ravioli to China, or did the Marco Polo take lanzolamian and jiaozi from China back to Italy? Well, all I know is I had a good time shooting noodles, both Chinese. Oh, is that all? Anyway, I like to eat noodles. I shot a lot of noodles, and the real answer to this whole thing is that noodles and jiaozi and ravioli, and it all was in both China and Italy before Marco Polo ever arrived there. It was invented by the Persians and brought there by the Arabs, so I'm told, by the highest authorities. Another lucky moment. Photographers are paid to be lucky. I'm shooting this guy with his falcon. Obviously, he loves his bird, and you can see this connection between them. It's an important picture because Marco Polo describes all the falconry going on, and who has the best falcons, because that was the big sport of the Khan and the Mongols. And again, just by some luck, I have been photographing this guy with his bird, holding it, throwing it in the air, doing all kinds of stuff. And then his grandson walks into the back of the picture, and bango, I have another picture that elevates it above all the others. This is the one we ran. Dust storms. Wow, he described dust storms, and I was praying for dust storms. Most people want to put their camera away when they see one, but photographers need to pull it out and use that to photograph this very odd and difficult situation, because most everybody runs away from dust storms, so it's hard to find a subject. And there I was on the top of this hill, and the wind comes blowing in, and my subject was right in front of me. So I got this picture, which is something that Marco described and must have gone through a lot of these. Well, you know, the camera is nothing but, to a carpenter, a hammer is a tool. To a photographer, the camera is also just a tool, and it's a replaceable one, even though it's rather expensive, but they are insured. So I would prefer, if I could get the picture, that's the most important thing, and sometimes you have to sacrifice the well-being of your camera to the need of getting the photograph. So I shoot in the rain, I shoot in the snow, I shoot in all kinds of weather where you're not supposed to pull your camera out, because that's why I buy the best cameras and the strongest ones, because I expect them to hold up. The cover, a very important picture, Marco Polo crossing the desert. Let me tell you about this story, because it might surprise you. So I get to this sand dune in Dunhuang. It's very famous. It must have been even famous in Marco's day, because they call it the singing sand dune. And he's the first to describe the sound of the wind as it comes over the top of this sand dune, 1,000-foot high, and he says it sounds like singing. So this is the singing sand dunes of Dunhuang. It's one of the highest in the world, 1,000 feet. And anyway, I got there and I was just totally disappointed, because when I first saw the scene, yes, it was a beautiful dune, but there were also several hundred camels at the base of it, and several hundred tourists waiting to get on those camels and travel around this large dune. And I thought, like, oh my God, how am I going to make a picture out of this? Well, we got back in the Land Cruiser and drove around the mountain, and I started seeing the possibilities as it got later in the day, as I looked at the backlight, and I thought, I need to backlight this situation. So we waited till, this must be about 5 o'clock. The sun's at about 45-degree angles. It's coming up over the top of the dune, cresting, making these very nice shapes as it crests over the top of these dunes. And here come the travelers. I won't call them tourists at this point, but and unfortunately all those camels have numbers on them: 206, 105, 33, 98. So I thought, how do I get those out of the picture? Well, I underexposed, so I shot it backlit. The sun is coming over the top. These camels, therefore, are in shadow, and I get this picture of Marco Polo crossing the Taklamakan, and you can't see the numbers and the fact that there are 6 tourists there on a well-trodden trail being led around the mountain. But as I said, my job is to give you the sense of travel in the 13th century, so I think I did my job. But this is the Hushi Quarter. This is part of the Silk Road. Every traveler had to travel this way, as well as Marco, of course. And he was walking for days right alongside the Great Wall of China. So here's the Great Wall. Look at it. It's what, 10 feet high? It's made out of mud. Compare this to that 100-foot wall that I showed you in BAM, in which he talked about it, the lofty walls of mud. Why would he ever talk about this wall? And so here goes that argument by those who say he never made it to China. Why would he talk about the Great Wall when the wall was not great? This is the Han Dynasty wall. It was built in starting in the year 200, so it was already 1,000 years old when Marco Polo first saw it. What he didn't see, and what Francis Wood and other critics are referring to, is the Ming Dynasty wall, which was built 300 years after Marco Polo was there. That wall that you see around Great Beijing is worthy of mentioning. This one, no. He didn't mention it. Who cares about the Han Dynasty Great Wall, the one that he saw? It just wasn't great. I'm in Suzhou, and I'm looking across the Grand Canal. I've chosen to be there at sunset. I am standing on the road with a very long lens, maybe 400, maybe even more, I can't remember, 600. The location I can choose. The time to be there is my choice. But how could I ever know that on this rope way, this is the tow line where the laborers would use this little road to walk along and pull the barges up the Grand Canal, up the and to the Yangtze against the current. And I'm so far away from this, there's just no, even if I had a telephone, I couldn't have called down here, a cell phone to tell this. Well, maybe I could have, but anyway, the point is that I have chosen this location, I've chosen the time to be there, and who could have ever predicted that that woman would walk precisely down the middle of this with those 2 buckets at sunset, and I get this picture just before the boat comes into the picture and ruins ruins it all also. So photographer's luck. That's all I can say. Being there at the right time, right place. Marco talks about Westlake and how amazing this town of Hangzhou is, because he calls it the world's greatest city. He is witnessing stuff there that, of course, it's a city of 1 million, and Venice at the time had 100,000 people. So obviously he was impressed. One of the reasons people didn't believe him is he came back with tales just like this. Oh yeah, over there in a place called China, there are 1 million people living in the city, and they catch their fish several times a year by growing the fish in the lake. Nobody had heard of aquaculture before. So, of all things, they're still doing that. And of all things, I happen to be there just when I'm walking along the shores, and I look out and I see a bunch of fishermen. Not only that, by the time I get in the boat and find a boat, get over there, they're just hauling in the catch. And they weren't real happy when I jumped on the boat, their big tender boat where they were pulling the catch. The small boats were all around this big tender. I just jumped on top of the big one and shot down into this crowd to make this very kind of graphic picture with the nice scenery of the lake in the background. As he described, pavilions on the lake, on the edge of the lake for partying, just the way it is today. But he was the first to describe aquaculture, and here it is in living color. He doesn't talk about bound feet as well, but I think he does talk about bound feet. Of course, I went out of my way, therefore, to find women with bound feet to illustrate this point, and I had these women ready to pose for me in front of this red door, and of course I'm shooting constantly, so as they're approaching the red door, before they're sitting down, I'm even shooting, and just so happened that after shooting a lot, same thing, a lot of rolls on this situation, the best picture was the one I shot right at the beginning, where she's standing, because those feet look just so tiny. And all the other ones I took when she was sitting down just didn't work. I had them with their grandchildren, with their with people with normal feet, just to show the difference. I had all kinds of portraits, and this one worked. He didn't mention cormorant fishing either. So here we are now, just 2 or 3 or 4 things he didn't talk about. And however, on his deathbed, I must say, he is said to have said to the priest who was asking if he had anything he would regrets in his life, and he said, you know, if he would wish to take back any of these tall tales he might have told, and he said, I've only told you half of what I've seen. So maybe this was one thing that might have escaped his memory, is the fact that cormorants were used for fishing even back in the 1200s. A great landscape depends on great light, and that was one such day. I think that's why photographers sometimes think they have a direct connection with somebody up there. Things happen and you're standing and walking at a scene, and suddenly the light comes down. We like to call those God rays, like God has just sent them down just for us to see and therefore photograph. But that is one of those occasions. Boom, just where you want it lit. Printing press, I didn't have a lot of light. I chose to blur the action, so I get this nice soft blur of color, yet you can still see what actually is going on as they're putting down the paper and sliding the ink across it. The most extreme form of prayer, Chiak, is probably the most demanding form of pilgrimage in the world. Prostrating themselves fully, worshippers cover tens, sometimes hundreds of miles. Well, think of the photographer who needs to, every time that woman hit the ground, so did I, trying to get the picture of this very extreme form of worship. I run in front of her a few steps, get down, and hope that she would decide to do it right in front of me. But I had to be lower than she was, so I am lying flat on the ground, as you can see here. So we got him to China, And I showed all these pictures to my editors, and they said, you know, we can't leave Marco Polo in China. We've got to take him home. Nobody's ever done that. Nobody's even attempted to do it. Most people say, oh, we'll do Marco Polo in China, or we'll do Marco Polo from Venice to China. Nobody has ever completed any of the, well, the one in China is probably fairly easy, but the one Venice to China is fairly impossible. I don't know of any others who have ever done that. And certainly nobody has ever done from China back to Iran, so we thought we'd try. And so they gave me another couple of months, and I headed first for Vietnam, where this would have been his first landing. Everybody who travels the Sea Silk Road, the route, the water route back to Europe, would be going along the South China Sea, following the trade wind. So the first place you land is always Vietnam, because that's where the monsoon's going to blow you. It starts in December, blows you down the coast. You end up in Vietnam, and so did I. Vietnam's a very favorite place of mine, as I shot many pictures there back in the 90s. Very friendly people. I ended up adopting my daughter from Vietnam. Here's, of course, he's traveling by boat, and so he stayed on the coast, as did I. Here's a wonderful little village where they do shrimp, and I just happened to get this very translucent tray of of squid there with the light coming through. Again, I shoot by necessity when things are happening, and that is not necessarily in the best light, but again, you use that to your advantage, and this light, it works. Anything that he might have seen, I shoot, and this is a very interesting form of fishing, which I was dying to do. These guys have these long stilts on. They walk out in the water, and they use their dip net, so they can get deep, deep out in the water there and get better catches. And happen to be there at the best time of the day, sunrise. The light is sublime. It's soft. It's very directional, and color-wise, it's really warm. So photographers like to call early morning, the 30 minutes before. This is a few minutes before the sun is actually out, and 30 minutes after as magic hour. And likewise, in the afternoon, 30 minutes before sunset and 30 minutes after sunset are called the same magic hour. And these are the times of day that are best for photography because of that quality of that light. But as I was saying, this is not a reason to put your camera away in the rest of the day either. But especially for landscapes, that is the time you want to be there. So I get up for every sunrise, and I'm there for every sunset. In a rice go down, great light, lots of movement. I'm using a very slow shutter speed, maybe 1/8 of a second. I'm throwing in a little strobe to lighten those faces, and also the strobe has the effect of sharpening the subject, especially when they're moving around that much. So I get this mixture of blur and movement thanks to the strobe. He goes to Cambodia, goes up the Mekong. To take this picture looks very simple, but how do you get the separation between these two boats? Well, the only way to do it is by getting on a boat as high as possible, so that these, if you're on water, these two boats would just sort of meld with each other and to be lost in the shadow of this palm tree background. Knowing that, I hired the biggest boat I could find to get up on the highest part of it, and then I remember I put a bunch of bed frames on top of the deck to get even higher in order to separate these two boats against the black background and put them against instead this very golden water again at sunrise. Have the idea for the picture first and then go out and execute. And then all the rest of the picture depends on the body English of the guys whacking the nets. South China Sea. So I went all the way to South China Sea just to see that water, to get a contrast with the rest of the story, which doesn't have water like that. Mostly, as you saw in Vietnam, are much murkier colored water. I knew I was going to find this in the Philippines, and he talks about the Philippines and its thousands of islands, and there we were. Shot at midday, as I was saying before. If you want the color to stay in the water, shoot at midday with a polarizer. Adam's Peak. Every explorer, every traveler who's gone to Sri Lanka seems to mention Adam's Peak. Whether you're Ibn Battuta, Marco Polo, Zheng He, the Chinese admiral, they all talk about Adam's Peak with some reverence, because at the top of this mountain you have three religions. You got Muslims who believe the footprint that's up at the top there is Muhammad's footprint, or if you're Indian, you might believe it's Krishna's footprint, and if you're Christian, you think it's Adam's footprint. So they call it Adam's Peak. You climb to the top, and you have three religions worshipping up there. In the island of Ceylon, there is an exceedingly high mountain. It rises right up so steep and precipitous that no one could ascend it, were it not that they have taken and fixed to several great and massive iron chains, so disposed that by help of these men are able to mount to the top. And they say that on this mountain is the sepulchre of Adam. Okay, here's a fun picture, because I was shooting in Indonesia, and on the island of Sumatra. Marco is blown there by the trade winds, and he's waiting has to wait there for the winds to shift from the northeast monsoon. He's got to wait for the southeast monsoon to blow him up through the Malacca Straits into the Indian Ocean, and he never leaves the coastline because he's afraid of the Bataks. And who are the Bataks? Well, they were cannibals. So he certainly didn't want to go up into the mountains and run into those people, so he spent 5 months on the coastline, and I arrived in Sumatra. I went directly for the highlands to meet these people. Unfortunately, or fortunately or unfortunately for pictures, they of course are no longer cannibals. They don't eat human beings, but in fact they've become all Christian. And while I was looking for a subject, went to a wedding at a church, and I walked in. I was shooting the couple, the bride and the groom, and they were they were eating fish. And after I got these pictures, I brought them back to Washington, and my picture editor, Susan Welchman, said, "That fish looks exactly like a human hand." And that became our illustration for the man-eating Bataks. Here I'm on a beach in Kerala, south of Kerala, and I'm looking at this scene of all these boats. Not one engine, not one vestige of the 21st century. Families pulling in nets from these big boats in which they use these incredibly heavy oars to get out there. Here's that same problem. If I shot on the beach, what would I get? I'd get a mass of silhouettes, unseparated and all bunched together. It wouldn't have been a picture, so I'm looking for a high angle. I'm on the top of one of these, the bow of one of these boats that's beached up on the, further up the beach, and I'm shooting like crazy as the sun is coming up from this side. One of my favorite situations is, as you can see, backlight. I've showed you a lot of backlight pictures. And then I put the long lens on, and from that same perch, I'm shooting the boats as they're going back out into the water to tend to the nets. You see how heavy these oars are. Anyway, this is just long lens, long glass. And then I got the wide angle back on, and I'm shooting them as the nets are pulled in. They're in really tight. And I've got these nice hands filling the sky here, and all the men participating in pulling in the catch. And then even the little kids get involved as they get right down into the nets to pull out the littlest fish. And we thought this was a good illustration for Marco, because he says, in all of this province of Maabar, there is never a tailor to cut a coat or stitch it, seeing that everybody goes naked. There you have it. So I say goodbye to the coast of India. It's blue because the sun has just gone down. The sky is still blue. I've got that good reflected light from the sky, making the entire ocean blue. Across there is where Marco wants to go back to his homeland and the coast of Iran, where he will land and head on up to Venice. Here's the biggest cow god in all of India, and I just happened to be there on the day when they decided to pour a lot of curried milk on its head. Photographer's luck. Who knew that that was going to happen, and therefore I'd have a picture that was worth looking at as opposed to just a picture of this. Yeah, he's pouring curried milk and blessing this cow. And we were there in the morning. They said, oh, well, you should come back in the afternoon. There'll be several thousand people here. It was like, thank you very much. We'll be back. These people are idolaters, and many of them worship the ox because it is a creature of such excellence. They would not eat beef for anything in the world, nor would they on any account kill an ox. I'm on my last round the world ticket, and when I was doing this story, I was on constant round the world tickets. And one of my last stops was Genoa, Italy, where I went to photograph the place where Marco Polo ended up in jail, and from where he wrote his book, which he boldly called The Description of the World. Now, he got back to Venice after 24 years of travel, somewhere in 1293, somewhere around there. And he's home for a while and gets, however, because he's a nobleman, he ends up serving on one of Venice's warships in their battle with Genoa, which was the other military or sea power of the day. And he's captured in a battle off of Korčula, which is in Yugoslavia, not Yugoslavia, what they call the Dalmatian coast. I can't even, whatever it's called now. Anyway, so off of Korčula, he's captured and taken to Genoa. The battle, Venice lost that battle, and he's thrown into jail in this building. And this Palazzo San Giorgio, I went to photograph, and let me tell you about the picture first. So I'm sitting there, and I arrived there, and it's pouring rain. My luck. It has this beautiful facade. I'm sitting there going like, oh my God, well, what am I going to do? What would Marco Polo do? He'd go to the local trattoria, which I did, and had a bowl of pasta, and I came out, and the sun was gloriously shining. I looked down, I saw this puddle, I saw the reflection in the puddle, and just about the same time, this bird starts flying across. And I capture the bird, the reflection, the building, and it's my ender shot. So he's in this prison. He's in this building. He happens to be paired up with this guy by the name of Rustichello, a romance writer of romance novels. Now, in those days, there was no such thing as a factual book. The romance novels usually describe fantastical beasts, half man, half animal kind of imagery. And however, Marco Polo starts telling him this amazing tale, and Rustichello writes it down. Now, first of all, if Rustichello and Marco Polo were not in this prison together, this book would never have been written. It was not like Marco Polo had the idea of writing a great best-selling book and therefore sat down and plagiarized or copied or took somebody else's words and threw it together because he wanted to make $1 million. No, he just happened to be in this prison with this guy Rustichello, who therefore he told a bunch of stories, and the guy wrote it down, and the thing ends up getting published, and it's the world's most popular book, and goes many editions, and every one of these people is still questioning him because he described all these things, departed more knowledge to than anyone before him or after him, gave more geographic knowledge to the world. How can one man have amassed so much knowledge, such accurate knowledge, on the geography, on the people, on the economy, and on all these places by sitting in a coffee shop in Constantinople, Istanbul, as those who don't believe he made it there think that by sitting there and asking questions to other travelers that he could write this book. Well, it's impossible. He wouldn't have even known what to ask and where to ask it about. I mean, about that island that you call Sri Lanka. Nobody knew that. How is he going to say, how would he ever know that there's this place called Adam's Peak and this happens on it and these 3 religions and, it's just too detailed. It's impossible. Anyway, so I think by just doing this, I am hopefully convincing you, as I am so totally convinced that he had to have gone to China, because there's just no way that anybody could do this other than having seen it with their own eyes.